The night Corrine Baudet accidentally destroyed a billionaire's briefcase was also the night she discovered that a grilled cheese sandwich could change your life. She didn't know that yet, obviously. At 11:47 on a Tuesday, standing in the back stairwell of the Harrington Grand in downtown Calgary, she was mostly thinking about how her feet hurt and whether the vending machine on the 4th floor still had those salt and vinegar chips she liked. Corrine worked the overnight shift at the Harrington. Not the glamorous part of overnight. Not the front desk with its soft lighting and marble countertops and guests arriving in black cars. She worked the other part, the mop and bucket part. The kind where you moved through the building like a ghost, restoring things to order before the morning shift came on and pretended nothing had ever been touched. She was 28. She had a student loan she was slowly, determinedly ignoring, a small apartment in Inglewood that she loved despite the radiator that clanked every night at 2 a.m., and a habit of talking to herself quietly while she worked, which had startled more than a few late-arriving guests over the years. That Tuesday she was talking to herself about grilled cheese. Sharp cheddar, she murmured, pushing her cart down the 14th floor hallway. Maybe some Dijon on the bread, or honey mustard. No, Dijon. Definitely Dijon. She turned the corner and ran directly into a man carrying a very large, very important-looking leather briefcase. The collision was total. The briefcase flew. The cart tipped sideways. The bottle of cleaning solution that Corrine had left improperly secured, a mistake she would think about for the rest of her career, sailed through the air in a graceful arc and landed, open end down, squarely on top of the briefcase. There was a moment of silence that felt geological in scale. Corrine looked at the puddle of enzymatic cleaner, spreading slowly across the leather. She looked at the man standing in front of her. He was tall, somewhere in his early 40s, with dark hair that was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. He was wearing a suit that she recognized, even through her mortification, as the kind of suit that cost more than 2 months of her rent. "Oh no," she said. "Oh no, no, no." She grabbed the briefcase, upended it, tried to blot the cleaner with the hem of her uniform shirt before remembering she had a cloth. The man watched her do all of this without saying a word. When she finally looked up, he was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I'll pay for it." I'll figure out how. It'll just take me approximately forever, but I will absolutely." "What does it smell like?" he asked. She blinked. "Sorry, the cleaner. What does it smell like?" She sniffed the briefcase cautiously. "Lavender and something else. Maybe pine? He crouched down and picked up the briefcase himself, turning it over in his hands. "That's not actually terrible. Your briefcase smells like a cleaning product. It smelled like coffee before. I spilled coffee on it in Vancouver." He looked up at her. "I'm starting to think this briefcase just attracts liquids." Corrine stared at him. Then, because she was tired and her feet hurt and the absurdity of the moment had pushed past her professional reflexes, she laughed, a real one, short and helpless. He smiled. It rearranged his whole face. "I'm really very sorry," she said again, getting herself back. "If you give the front desk your room number, I can make sure the hotel covers the cleaning cost or replacement, whatever. Don't worry about it." He stood up, tucked the briefcase under his arm. "I was coming down to find the kitchen." "The kitchen? I haven't eaten since 2 o'clock this afternoon and room service stops at 11. He glanced down the hallway. "Is there a staff kitchen? A vending machine? Anything?" She hesitated. The staff kitchen was technically off-limits to guests. She also knew, from 3 years of working the overnight shift, that the chef on the morning rotation left bread in the bread box because he came in early and liked to eat breakfast before his shift officially started, and that there was always cheese in the refrigerator for the staff lunch service. "I could make you a grilled cheese," she said before she'd fully decided to say it. He looked at her. "You could. Staff kitchen. I was going up anyway." She paused. "I'm going to be honest with you, the facilities are not what you're used to." "I grew up in Sudbury," he said. "I'm familiar with non-fancy kitchens." The staff kitchen was small and fluorescent lit and smelled like decades of reheated meals. There was a folding table, 4 mismatched chairs, and a bulletin board covered in shift schedules and a laminated sheet that said, "Please label your food, this means you Derek." Corrine found the bread and the cheese and a pat of butter that was someone's. But the someone was not here and she would replace it tomorrow. The man, she still didn't know his name, sat down at the folding table and watched her work. "You're very calm about this," he said. "About what?" "Feeding a stranger in the middle of the night." She pressed the sandwich flat in the pan. "You didn't seem dangerous. You were upset about the briefcase smell in a normal way." "What's an abnormal way to be upset about a briefcase smell?" Yelling, she flipped the sandwich. "You'd be surprised." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm Reed," he said. "Reed Gallagher, Corrine Baudet." She slid the sandwich onto a plate that had a small chip on the rim and set it in front of him. "It's not room service, but the bread is good." He took a bite, his eyes closed briefly. She had seen that expression before on the overnight shift, the particular relief of someone who hasn't eaten in too long finally eating something warm. "This," he said, "is genuinely excellent, sharp cheddar. Dijon on the inside of the bread before you butter the outside." He looked at the sandwich with new respect. "That's not a standard move, my grandmother's recipe. She was from Lac Saint Jean. Everything involved Dijon or maple syrup or both." Reed Gallagher laughed. It was a good laugh, the kind that sounded like it surprised him. They talked. That was the part Corrine wouldn't be able to fully explain later, when she was trying to reconstruct the evening for herself. They just talked. He asked about the overnight shift, and she told him about it honestly. The strange peacefulness of empty hallways, the way the building felt different at 3 in the morning, like it exhaled. She asked about Sudbury, and he told her about growing up there, the son of a mining engineer and a school librarian, about leaving at 18 to study business in Toronto and feeling, for the first 5 years, like he was wearing shoes that didn't quite fit. She did not ask what he did now. She could see the suit. She had a sense. At some point she realized she'd been sitting at the folding table for 45 minutes instead of finishing her floor. "I have to work," she said. "Right." He stood up, picked up the plate, and put it in the sink. "I'll wash it. You don't have to do that." I ate the sandwich. "It's only fair." She watched him wash the plate at the small sink. There was something odd about it, a man in a suit like that doing dishes in a staff kitchen at midnight. He didn't seem to notice the oddness, or maybe he did and didn't care. "Thank you," he said, handing the plate back. "For the sandwich. Thank you for not making me fill out an incident report about your briefcase." He smiled. "Good night, Corrine Baudet." She finished her shift. She took the bus home in the gray early light and sat in her apartment and ate cereal and thought about grilled cheese in Sudbury and a laugh that sounded surprised. She thought, "That's probably the last time I'll see him." She was wrong. He was back the following Tuesday. Same floor, different time. Just past 10, not quite 11. She was restocking towels from the linen cart when she heard footsteps and looked up, and there he was, still in a suit, this time without the briefcase. "You're back," she said. "I'm here a lot," he said. "I have an office in the building next door. When meetings run long, I sometimes just stay." She nodded. "How's the briefcase?" "Dry. Still smells faintly of lavender." He paused. "I was hoping I'd run into you." She put a folded towel on the cart. "Why?" He seemed to consider how to answer that. "I don't usually talk to people like that." "Like what?" "Like I did that night." "Without." He stopped. "Without it being about something." Corrine looked at him. She'd met a lot of guests over 3 years. She knew the difference between the ones who were genuinely kind and the ones who were charming as a reflex. Reed Gallagher stood in the hallway of a hotel where he was probably paying $400 a night, talking to her like she was a person he wanted to keep talking to. There was nothing performed about it. "I'm on until 6, she said. "But I take a break at 2. Staff kitchen." Something shifted in his expression. "I'll bring the cheese this time." He did. He showed up at 2 with a bag from a 24-hour grocery 2 blocks away. Sharp cheddar, sourdough bread, a small jar of grainy Dijon, and set it on the folding table like it was completely normal. Like they did this after that, not every week, but often enough. He'd come in on late nights, when work had kept him in the building past midnight, and somewhere around 2 o'clock he'd appear in the staff kitchen doorway, and she'd make sandwiches, and they'd sit at the folding table under the fluorescent lights and talk. He told her about the company. Gallagher Capital. He'd built it from nothing over 15 years, a private equity firm that had grown from 3 people in a Toronto office to 140 people across 4 cities. He was proud of it. She could hear it in the way he talked about it, not like bragging, more like you talk about something you made with your hands. She told him about culinary school. She'd started 3 years ago, took 1 semester, had to leave when her mother got sick. The plan was always to go back. The plan was still the plan. "What kind of cooking?" he asked one night. "Pastry," she said. "I know that's not the prestigious answer." "Says who? The culinary world, largely." "The culinary world is wrong," he said. "Pastry is harder than anything. The precision alone." "Do you cook?" "I make exactly 2 things. Grilled cheese." "You don't make it, I make it, and scrambled eggs." "I'm an exceptional scrambled eggs person." She raised an eyebrow. "You cook the eggs slowly?" He pointed at her. "Low heat the whole time, never more than medium. You take them off while they're still slightly wet. Gordon Ramsay method. Gordon Ramsay and every French person who has ever lived." He leaned back in his chair. What's the most difficult thing to bake? She thought about it. Croissants, real ones. The lamination, folding the butter into the dough, getting the layers right. Most people who say they can make croissants have not actually made croissants. Could you teach me? She looked at him. In this kitchen? He looked around at the fluorescent lights and the "please label your food." This means you Derek sign and the mini fridge humming in the corner. Maybe not this kitchen specifically. They were both quiet for a moment, and Corrine was aware, in the way that you're aware of something only after it's been true for a while, that she'd been looking forward to these Tuesdays more than almost anything else. It was on a Thursday in March, not a Tuesday, which already felt off, that things changed. Corrine was in the third-floor linen room when she overheard two women talking in the hallway. Not guests. The tone was too comfortable, too certain. Staff, maybe, or visitors who knew the building. She wasn't listening on purpose. But her name reached her through the door, and then a man's name, and she went still. Corrine, the overnight cleaning girl. The voice was light, practiced. He's been meeting her in the staff kitchen. I have it on very good authority. Reed Gallagher and a cleaning girl. A second voice, drier. Really? Apparently they've been doing this for months. Some kind of, I don't know. It's embarrassing for him, honestly. Right when the Whitmore Group acquisition is on the table. A pause. She's no one. She literally mops floors. Corrine stood in the linen room and waited until the voices moved away down the hall. She put down the stack of towels she was holding very carefully and sat down on the step stool. She did not cry. She was not a person who cried easily. But she felt something cold move through her, the specific cold of something you already half knew being confirmed. She thought about the way Reed had smiled in the staff kitchen. She thought about him showing up with the sourdough and the grainy Dijon like it was nothing, like it was normal. She thought about the suit and the briefcase and Gallagher Capital and 140 people across 4 cities. She thought, I'm the cleaning girl, not in a self-pitying way, in a factual way. That was the word for what she was, in this building, in this story, the way certain people would always tell it. When her shift ended at 6, she walked home through the March cold and sat in her apartment for a long time. She didn't go to the staff kitchen the following Tuesday. He texted her on Thursday. She'd given him her number 3 months ago, an exchange that had felt so natural at the time that she hadn't thought twice about it. You weren't there on Tuesday. She looked at the text for a long time. I'm fine, she typed back. Just tired. There was a longer pause than usual. Can I call you? She almost said no. She sat with her thumb over the screen and then she typed, sure. His voice, when she answered, sounded careful, like someone navigating unfamiliar ground. What happened? Nothing happened. Corrine. She looked out her apartment window at the back alley. Someone had left a bicycle chained to the fire escape across the way, and it had been there for 6 months, and she'd always wondered whose it was. I overheard a conversation, she said, in the building. About you, about us. She paused. About me. Silence. What did you hear? He asked. She told him. Not all of it, but enough. The cleaning girl. The Whitmore acquisition. Embarrassing silence. Longer. Who was talking? He asked. His voice was quiet. I don't know. 2 women. One of them knew about the kitchen, he exhaled. Victoria Drummond Walsh, he said. She's on my board. She has a friend who's a regular at the hotel. A pause. I'll talk to her. Raid. She had no right to. She wasn't wrong, Corrine said. That's the thing, she wasn't wrong about the facts. The silence that followed was a different kind. What does that mean? He asked. It means, she stopped. Started again. I clean rooms. I'm trying to get back to school and I'm not there yet. You have a company and a board and an acquisition in progress, and I am not the right kind of person for whatever this is, Corrine. His voice was very even. What do you think this is? She didn't answer. Because I'll tell you what I think it is, he said. I think it's the only 2 hours of any given week where I actually feel like myself. A pause. I've been running that company for 15 years. I know what it looks like when I'm doing it right, and I know what it looks like when I'm just moving through it. The last year has been the second thing. Another pause. And then I ruined a briefcase at midnight, and a person I'd never met made me a grilled cheese sandwich and talked to me like a human being. Corrine leaned her head back against the wall. Victoria Drummond Walsh is going to make this complicated, she said. Victoria Drummond Walsh can manage her own business, he said. Which is not mine, she almost laughed. That's not actually how boards work. I know how boards work. I built the board. A beat. Come back on Tuesday? She did. What Corrine didn't know, and what Reed had not told her because he hadn't fully understood it yet himself, was that Victoria Drummond Walsh had been planning something much larger than gossip. She found out 6 weeks later, on a Monday that should have been unremarkable. She was coming off the overnight shift waiting for the elevator when she saw Reed crossing the lobby in a way that wasn't his usual way. Fast, jaw set, like he was holding something in with considerable effort. He saw her. He stopped. "Are you done?" he asked. "Just finished. Come with me." They went to a coffee shop 2 blocks from the hotel, the kind that had been there since 1987 and hadn't changed the decor, which Corrine had always found reassuring. He got them both coffee and a piece of coffee cake that neither of them ate and told her what had happened. Victoria Drummond Walsh had been quietly building a coalition on the board for 7 months. She wanted to take Gallagher Capital in a different direction, merge with a larger firm, the Whitmore Group, position it as a mid-level acquisition rather than a standalone. Reed's vision had always been independence. He'd built the company specifically not to be absorbed. The vote had been last Friday. 12 board members. 7 had sided, Corrine said. 7. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. 7 people I hired and built this with and, he stopped. I have the option to contest it. My lawyers think I have a case. But it would be 18 months of litigation, minimum, and in the meantime the company is. He shook his head. She looked at him across the table. He looked tired in a way that went past one night. He looked like someone who had been tired for months and was only now letting it show. "What do you want to do?" she asked. He was quiet for a long time. "I keep thinking about this thing my mother said when I left Sudbury. She said, 'Raid, a thing you build with bad wood will eventually show the rot.'" He looked up. "I built that board with bad wood in some places. I knew it, and I told myself the overall structure was sound enough to compensate." A pause. "I think she was right. She sounds like she was right. She was right about most things." He looked at the untouched coffee cake. "The part that keeps catching me, I'm angry about the betrayal. I'm angry about Victoria. I'm not as angry as I should be about losing the company." Corrine thought about that. "What does that mean?" "I think it means I was already somewhere else," he said, mentally, for longer than I realized. He looked at her steadily. "I think I was already thinking about something different." The something was quiet between them for a moment. "What was the something?" she asked. He smiled at her. It was the rearranged face smile. "A cafe, maybe. Somewhere small. The kind where the menu fits on a chalkboard and everything is made in-house." He paused. "The kind where the pastry is done properly, not as an afterthought." Corrine felt something move in her chest that wasn't quite any single emotion, more like several of them arriving at once. "That's a very specific vision," she said. "I've been thinking about it," he said, "for approximately 4 months. A beat. Since someone told me croissants are harder than they look, and I thought, she's right. And what if there was somewhere you could get a real one at 7 in the morning? She looked at him across the coffee shop, in the unchanged since 1987 decor, with the uneaten coffee cake between them and the winter light coming in through the window. "I'd have to finish school," she said. "Yes, that's a year, maybe more, I know. And you'd need to figure out the business side. Location, lease, all of it." "I have some experience with business," he said very dryly. She laughed. He laughed too, the surprised kind. "And Victoria?" she asked. His expression settled. "She made her choice, I'll make mine." But Victoria, it turned out, had not finished. 2 weeks later, an article appeared in a Calgary business publication. It was framed carefully, not a hit piece, nothing that could invite a lawsuit. It was more like the implication of a hit piece. It talked about Reed's departure from Gallagher Capital, about unnamed sources who cited concerns about erratic decision-making in recent months and personal entanglements that distracted from leadership. It did not name Corrine. It didn't have to. Corrine read it on her phone on the bus home and felt sick in a way that had nothing to do with the early hour. She called Reed. "I saw it," he said before she could speak. "Reed, this is Victoria trying to pressure me not to contest," he said. "If I'm publicly discredited, a legal challenge is harder. She knows that. What are you going to do?" He was quiet for a moment. "I was going to ask if you'd come to a meeting with me." "What kind of meeting?" "I've spoken to 3 of the 7 board members individually over the past 2 weeks," he said. 2 of them, I think, voted the way they did because they were afraid of Victoria, not because they actually agreed with her. There's a former board member, Juliana, who resigned 4 years ago over exactly this kind of thing. She has documentation of a pattern." A pause. "My lawyers think if we can demonstrate that the vote was coerced rather than freely made, and that Victoria had a financial incentive that she didn't disclose, we have grounds to invalidate it." "Why do you want me at the meeting?" A beat. "Because you see things clearly," he said, "and because I'd like you there." It was a simple answer. It undid something that had been clenched in her since the article. She went to the meeting. The former board member, Joanna Kessler Park, was in her 60s, with reading glasses pushed up on her head and an expression that suggested she had very little patience for anything not at the level of evidence. She spread documents across a boardroom table, emails, meeting minutes, a paper trail that went back 18 months, and walked them through Victoria's financial stake in the Whitmore Group, a stake that made her vote on the acquisition not a matter of business judgment but a conflict of interest she had never disclosed. She should have recused herself from the vote, Joanna said. She didn't. That's not a gray area. Raid looked at the documents for a long time. Why didn't you bring this forward earlier? Joanna looked at him over her reading glasses. Because earlier you were not ready to see it. A pause. You had a great deal invested in the idea that the people around you were as straightforward as you are. It's a nice quality. It's also occasionally a liability. Reed absorbed it without flinching. Fair. The two board members you mentioned, Graham and Sutherland. They'll sign affidavits if Victoria's influence is documented, yes, I believe so. Joanna gathered the papers. Then we have a case. She looked at Corrine. And you are? A friend, Corrine said. Joanna looked at her with more attention than was comfortable. A friend who wanted to see the documents, a friend who wanted to understand what happened. Joanna almost smiled. Sensible. The next 3 months were not dramatic in the way that movies are dramatic. They were slow and grinding and full of legal language that required reading twice. There were depositions and document requests and 2 more articles from Victoria's direction, each less subtle than the last. Reed worked with his lawyers and Corrine went back to culinary school part-time. She'd found a program at SAIT that worked with her schedule, and they talked every day, not always about either of those things. She made croissants for the first time in a proper kitchen and called him from the parking lot afterward. How did they turn out, he asked. Lamination was inconsistent on the left side. The right side was perfect. That's 50% success. In croissants, 50% is actually not bad for a first attempt. What's your goal? 90% by summer. I'll invest in that. In April, the board vote was invalidated. The undisclosed conflict of interest was documented. The 2 coerced votes were formally withdrawn, and the legal challenge succeeded not with a dramatic courtroom confrontation but with a quietly filed motion and a very large legal bill that Reed paid without complaint. Gallagher Capital remained independent. Victoria Drummond Walsh resigned from the board and, per the settlement terms, from any affiliate boards connected to the Whitmore Group for a period of 5 years. She did not go quietly. There were emails, there were phone calls to other board members that Reed heard about secondhand. But in the end, quiet or not, she was gone. Reed called Corrine when it was done. It's over, he said. Good, she said. Come and taste these, the croissants. We're in lab today. I made a passion fruit tart. He came. He sat in the student lounge outside the kitchen with the careful stillness of someone not wanting to disrupt a process. And when she came out with a small plate and a plastic fork, he tasted it with the same closed-eyes expression he'd had over the grilled cheese in the staff kitchen almost a year before. Corrine. It's good, right? It's extraordinary. He looked up. I mean that exactly. She sat down across from him. There's something I've been thinking about. Yes, the cafe, the thing you mentioned, with the chalkboard menu. I want to be a co-founder, she said. Not an employee. Not a chef you hire. A founder. He held her gaze. That's what I was thinking, equal stakes, he agreed. Though I'll note that the croissant lamination is still inconsistent. She pointed at him. The left side was inconsistent. The right side was perfect. What are we calling it? She'd thought about this. She had, in fact, been thinking about it since the night she sat in her apartment in the March cold and looked at a bicycle chained to a fire escape and thought about briefcases and clean floors and what she was actually worth. The linen room, she said, after where I work. He was quiet for a moment. Where you worked, he said, past tense. She smiled. Where I worked. The linen room opened 6 months later on a quiet street in Kensington. It was small. 8 tables, a long wooden counter, a kitchen in the back where you could see the pastry work happening if you knew what to look for. The menu fit on a chalkboard. The croissants were made fresh every morning, lamination even on both sides now, and there was a particular chocolate Dijon tart that appeared every Thursday that people began to plan their weeks around. On the morning it opened, Corrine unlocked the front door and stood in the early light, looking at the small room they had built. The tables they'd sourced from an estate sale in Cochrane, the tile she'd chosen one Sunday in a salvage yard in Airdrie, the handwritten sign in the window that said simply, "We open at 7, come for the coffee, stay for the croissant." Reed came in at 6:45 to make sure everything was ready. He didn't make grilled cheese that morning. There was no room for it in the prep work, but she saw him stand in the kitchen doorway for a moment, looking at the proof oven and the rolling pin and the marble slab she'd found secondhand and cleaned until it gleamed. And he had the expression he sometimes got when he was calculating something, except it wasn't a calculation. It was something else, something you don't have a precise word for in business, though everyone who builds something worthwhile eventually encounters it. She came to stand beside him. "Ready?" she asked. He looked at the kitchen, at her. "I've been ready," he said, "since the lavender briefcase." She unlocked the door at 7 o'clock, and the first customer was an overnight worker coming off shift, still in her uniform, who asked for a coffee and then stopped when she saw the passion fruit tart in the case and said quietly, like it had caught her off guard, "Oh, that's beautiful." Corrine rang her up and wrapped the tart and handed it across the counter. "We're here every morning," she said.